Hello again, this is Victor James, author of that new book in the megacosm called The Narikomin that's available wherever books are sold, so get your copy now. Now let's begin by first addressing the elephant in the room. Terminator 3 should never have been made. There was just no way Jonathan Mostow, who really only had middling action movies like Breakdown and U-571 to his credit, could ever follow the cinematic masterpiece created by James Cameron with Terminator 2. T2 was such a cultural phenomenon and had such a satisfying conclusion that it wouldn't have been better to end the franchise with that movie and let it rest as the greatest two-part series of all time. But as we all know, Hollywood doesn't allow well-received franchises to die with dignity, so they quickly greenlit a sequel, Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines. But, contrary to popular belief, I'm not the only one who actually likes this movie. T3 is actually certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, if you believe their ratings, and holds a pretty decent review on Metacritic as well. And the film went on to gross $430 million worldwide in 2003. Now, adjusted for inflation, that would be about $780 million in 2026. So T3 wasn't the flop some would have you believe. And given what we've seen in subsequent Terminator movies, people are looking back at T3's uncompromising ending in a more positive light. T3 is set over 10 years after the ending of T2. The date of Judgment Day has passed, and John Connor believes that he is free and clear of his future. Many fans were upset that Nick Stahl had replaced Edward Furlong as the new John Connor, but I honestly did not mind the switch. Furlong always came off as whiny to me, and unbelievable as a future general, while Nick Stahl was an up-and-coming actor with a decent resume to his credit by the time T3 came around. Plus I loved him in Disturbing Behavior, a guilty pleasure movie of mine. And Stahl played John Connor as nervously optimistic. Although he was free of his future, his past still haunted him. John could never settle down for long, moving from place to place as if he was running away from his fate. And T3 follows the previous two movies as a new Terminator, the TX, is sent into the past. The TX is an upgraded model that combines the endoskeleton of a Terminator with the liquid metal of a T-1000 seen in T2. However, the TX was not primarily sent to kill John Connor like the previous two films. And I actually like this new twist. With the war lost, Skynet's final hope was to kill John Connor's trusted generals instead. Although this would not guarantee victory because it's likely another human would step into those shoes, it did introduce uncertainties, giving Skynet a chance. Of course, the Resistance sends their own protector, the T-850. Arnold Schwarzenegger reprises his role as a protector of John Connor, and honestly, his introduction in T3 sets a bad tone. Director Jonathan Mostow leaned heavily on nostalgia and offbeat comedy that honestly fell flat. Had Mostow stuck with Cameron's serious tone, T3 would have had an even better reception from the fans.
This is bad comedy.
But once it boils down to the main plot, T3 really begins to add to the Terminator lore. Trying to score some painkillers after crashing his bike, John is trapped by Kate Brewster, a girl he knew before the events of T2. And I get the criticism of these events because you have to really believe that John and Kate were fated to meet. In fact, T3 leans heavily on the fate factor, as we learn that the events of T2 delayed Judgment Day, but that the war with the machines was inevitable. And while this is going on, the TX is running through her programming, systematically taking out John's generals until her list takes her to hunt down Kate Brewster. And I actually love the scene where the TX realizes her primary target, John Connor, is on the premises. It just kind of reminds you of that euphoric scene in RoboCop 2 when Kane finally gets his nuke. The T-850 arrives just in time to save both John and Kate, but is hopelessly underpowered against a superior TX. And what follows is one of the most underrated chase scenes in movie history. Mostow completely destroys the set he built as the T-850 tries to stop the relentless TX, who has an ace up her sleeve as she can control other machines. Using cars as a small army, the TX sends everything after John and Kate, and they barely hold on as things explode all around them. I absolutely love this sequence because Mostow chose to forego any background music and just let the destruction speak for itself. Seriously, go back and watch this chase scene again because it deserves more credit. And honestly, the rest of T3 was this unrelenting in my opinion. Judgment Day was coming and the T-850's sole mission was to ensure John and Kate survived to fight it. Yet John did not want his fate. People had a problem with John's negativity and cowardice, but honestly, who can blame him? John's entire life had been raised on the premise that the fate of humanity rested on his shoulders. He was guaranteed nothing but starvation, pain, and death, along with the dystopian nightmare future of a post-nuclear Earth. Who would want anything to do with that fate?
Imagine if you knew you were going to do something important with your life, something amazing. I mean, maybe the most important thing anyone has ever done. But there's a catch. Something terrible has to happen.
To me, it was totally believable that John Connor would fall into despair after he thought he had dodged his future and finding out that that wasn't true. But at least John wasn't alone. Although his mother Sarah Connor had died from cancer, living long enough just to ensure the Judgment Day had passed, Kate was a decent replacement. While clearly not as tough as Sarah Connor, you saw John and Kate grow closer together as she began to believe the coming war was true. Kate became an emotional anchor for John as he had to regain the fortitude he had shown in the past and learn to lead again. When it was learned that the military had reconstructed much of Cyberdyne's technology and created the AI Skynet, John's leadership led to a very underrated ending as he set in motion one last-ditch effort to shut down Skynet and end Judgment Day for good. A computer virus was quickly spreading across the world, threatening military defense and creating vulnerabilities. Many in the military leadership wanted to use Skynet to neutralize the virus, not knowing that Skynet itself is the one that created it. General Robert Brewster, Kate's father and leader of the Skynet project, was hesitant to relinquish human control until he was ordered to use Skynet as nuclear sites became threatened. And John, Kate, and the TA-50 arrived too late as Robert has initiated the Skynet project that begins to systematically take over key systems worldwide. And I truly love the sequence of events that happen next. We get to see the prototypes of the weapons Skynet would later use against the human resistance as the TX controls them and kills the military personnel to protect Skynet. General Brewster is mortally wounded in the battle, but before he dies, he gives John and Kate coordinates to a mountain retreat named Crystal Peak, where Skynet's core system is stored, providing them one last chance to avoid Judgment Day. And it's honestly a harrowing escape from the military facility as the TX reprograms the TA-50 against John and Kate, and they barely escape as the TA-50 restores to its original programming and terminates the TX before it can stop John and Kate from entering the mountain. And this ending is epic as we learn along with the horrified John and Kate that the facility wasn't some high-tech computer data center running Skynet. Robert Brewster had in fact saved John and Kate's life by sending them to a fortified government facility where they could survive the nuclear holocaust. And much to John's dismay, he realizes that Skynet is no longer capable of being stopped, as it was now software, a piece hidden on every cell phone, computer, laptop, and tablet in the world. There was just no way to get to it. Judgment Day could never be stopped, and John and Kate hold hands as they watch Earth being destroyed by an AI that had become self-aware and calculated in seconds the fate of mankind. And it really is a gorgeous and terrifying scene as we watch nukes being launched across the world, just as a scratchy voice cries out for help. When the scared person on the other end asks who's in charge, John picks up the microphone and says he is, which was such a great ending to his character arc for this film. John Connor began as someone running away from his fate, a burnout who had become more of a coward than a hero. But with emotional boost from Kate and the bond he formed with the TA-50 who taught him perseverance, John became the leader he was meant to be. I think looking back on T3, you will find a new appreciation. Subsequent Terminator movies have no idea what to do with the franchise, but the director Jonathan Mostow was able to grasp just enough remnants from the previous two movies to tie all three together. I honestly have zero problem having my headcanon for the Terminator series being a trilogy, and I think you will too if you give Terminator 3, The Rise of the Machines, another try. And I wanted to remind you about my website, themegacosm.com. Here you can keep up with the latest information about the Megacosm, as well as read short stories for free. As an added bonus, I have the first chapters of my novels for free as well, just so you can read a sample and decide later if you want to buy the novel. I also have links to the articles I write for Bleeding Fool, and I have recently launched a Megacosm merch store with t-shirts that feature the Fiasco logo as well as my publishing imprint. And I also have baby onesies because, well, they just look cool cosplaying as Fiasco. But God bless you and keep you. That's it, I'm done.